Good morning. Welcome to the Spin Zone. This is Brian Lewis, recapping the Ohio State victory over Penn State. First and foremost, I'm a Buckeyes fan, so it's gonna be hard for me to be in part. No, I'm kidding. It's one of those things where after the loss against Oregon, Ohio State needed to bounce back. Now, some key notes from the game, of course. That pick six in the first quarter, Penn State had all the momentum. All the momentum. All the momentum. They were up 10-0 at home. The crowd was going crazy. But as scary as it sounds, call me maybe a little bit maybe arrogant in a way, but I thought Penn State lost that game by giving up the touchdown on the next drive. Because that's how little faith I have in Penn State in winning big games. I think this game says more about Penn State being not an elite program than it does with Ohio State being good enough to beat them. Now, keep in mind, if this game were played in Columbus, I think Ohio State would have blown their doors off. Because this is James Franklin. James Franklin teams do not beat ranked teams on the road. And then on top of that, you look at the results against Ohio State, they don't beat them. The only year that they beat them was that lucky upset where they got away with the two penalties that should have been called. So in retrospect, Penn State, not an elite program. So I think that's time to put that to rest. But Ohio State did not play very well early on in that game. So that first drive was a disaster. You throw a pick six. Now, Will Howard came from Penn State. So he transferred to Kansas State. A lot of states here. Had a hell of a career at Kansas State. He was really good for them. And then transferred to Ohio State. Welcome aboard. Carmen, Ohio. And Will Howard threw for 185 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then after that pick six, really played pretty efficiently. Kashawn Judkins got a 95 yards rushing. Jeremiah Smith, 4 catches, but no touchdown. Emeka Egbuka's touchdown pretty much ended the Penn State momentum run a little bit, because after that, the game was very, very nip and tuck. If you look at Penn State's offensive numbers, it goes to show you that Drew Aller is completely and utterly atrocious. They didn't try to run the football. Allen, 12 carries for 27 yards, who had Katron Allen, who has 500 yards rushing on the season. But then you have, that little trick running, that 33-yard running play that they had with the tight end. That was cute. Singleton, I thought, had a good game as a runner. But they didn't really try to get him involved at all. I mean, the problem with Drew Aller is simple. It's the same problem they had with Trace McSorley. It's the same problem they had with... The problem with Penn State is simple. When they don't have a good quarterback, they don't win. That's their whole history. Todd Blackledge, they won a national title. Kerry Collins, they won a national title. And they've had some good quarterbacks. You remember Daryl Clark, right? Michael Robinson and Daryl Clark were dope for them. That was great. Those mid-2000s, late 2000s teams that Penn State had were freaking amazing. And I don't mean to shit on Penn State. Now, I was a freshman in college during the Sandusky trial, if you will. And that team went perfect, and then Bill O'Brien had them rolling. I think if Bill O'Brien had stayed as the coach, I think Penn State would be the third best team in the Big Ten, until, obviously, the whole realignment. But I think because of the fact that Bill O'Brien left the way he did, Hackenberg never improved, because I think when you have a freshman that loses a coach like that, it took a lot out of him. Not to veer off, but I think that's something to talk about with Penn State, because where are they as a program right now is more telling than anything else. Now, we could talk about Ohio State all day. I could talk as a Buckeyes fan all day about everything else, but since the loss to Oregon, they still have a lot to prove. This Penn State game proves nothing as a Buckeyes fan, because they still got to beat Michigan. As bad as Michigan is, they still got to beat Michigan. And then on top of that, you lost to Oregon. That was the test. And now you got to play USC and Washington. I mean, those are the teams. Those are the teams you challenge. This is the new Big Ten. Oregon is essentially the the challenge. Now, keep in mind, Ohio State has beat them in the past, so Oregon eventually had to get one over, right? Especially that national title game 10 years ago. Oregon fans had to have been a little bitter about that, especially with help of it, how bad Mariota played in that first half. So, back to Penn State. Sorry, I didn't mean to veer off. But with Penn State, you have James Franklin. Now, keep in mind, I'm going to look up the James Franklin reference here because this is a point that I know has been made before. His record against ranked teams, the whole 9 yards. I get it. I get it again. But you know what? We also have to look at James Franklin as a whole. Now, this is one of my criticisms. Now, the same criticism I have with James Franklin on the college level, I could also make the same reiterations to Mike Tomlin since he lost that Super Bowl to Green Bay with the Pittsburgh Steelers, mind you. Because, yes, they had some great teams in the mid-2010s that were competitive, just like Penn State's teams when he first got there in 2016 and 17 with the first full 4-year recruiting class that Penn State had. Those teams with Saquon Barkley, those were good teams. And the defenses were stacked, too. Like, I mean, I could go on for days. Like, that 2007, let's look at the 2016 Penn State team, first of all. Now, they were 11-3. They were 7th in the final poll. They scored 37 points a game. But Trace McSorley threw for 29 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. So, again, the quarterback play was more than adequate. But, again, you got kind of exposed. But you had Saquon Barkley, you had Andre Robinson, you had Chris Godwin, you had Deshaun Hamilton, you had Mike Gesicki, and Jawan Johnson. You had all that NFL talent on that team. That's not to say that McSorley's not good, because McSorley was a solid backup in Baltimore. But that's the scary thing about it. Now, the rest of James Franklin's resume. Now, let's go through it. 2014, 7-6. That was his first year. 2015, 7-6. That was a year where their strength of schedule was actually one of the top 20 worst in the country. Top 20 toughest, in the country. 2016 and 17, they won 11-2. Penn State in 2018 went 9-4. 2019, they won 11-2. I'm not going to count the COVID year. 21, they had the most transfers in the country, so I'm not going to count 7-6. I'll hold that against them. But 11-2 in 2022, 10-3 in 2023, and then of course there's 7-1. So he's kind of rebounded a little bit. Penn State have done pretty well in the transfer portal. They've benefited from it a lot. But this is where I think you have to look at also like the teams that they've beaten. I don't think I can remember one memorable Penn State win against I'm going to actually look up versus ranked teams on the road because I have to see how bad this actually is. It's crazy, though, because, all right, so James Franklin has not been able to do well. So this is straight from Sportskeeda, okay? 3-17 against top 10 teams in the country. And now you can make that 3-18 because he lost to Ohio. Actually, that might have been updated. Now, keep in mind, the biggest win that Penn State have is against a number 9 Utah, with Cam Rising being 2 degrees ago. And it's crazy because he's still 13-26 against ranked opponents in 11 seasons. So that means that you're beating one top 25 team a season. You're beating one top 25 team ranked a season. You're basically Notre Dame. No offense. People want to shit on Notre Dame over there. But that dude is in his first coaching job. Okay, now I'm not sticking up for, Notre Dame here. But when you're looking at the situation at hand, right? Like Marcus Freeman was a defensive coordinator, took over as head coach when Brian Kelly went to LSU. And Notre Dame, yeah, they've had their struggles. But again, that's because Sam Hartman didn't live up to the transfer portal hype. That's really it. If they had better quarterback play last year, that team would have won 10 games. I think that's where Penn State are at. I think Penn State and Notre Dame are kind of the equal, where you are very good, you have very good players, but I think Penn State are a little bit of a step ahead. But I think them, Michigan, and Notre Dame are going to be kind of in the same threshold for the next 10 years because that middling area of that Midwest, because Ohio State, Oregon, USC, Washington, those schools are probably going to prosper in this new Big Ten format. And probably Iowa and Minnesota too, to be honest with you. If Minnesota can somehow get out of that PJ Fleck contract and get a coach with a little bit more of a guy that can actually win some football games in a big level. But, it's crazy. That game yesterday, you're up 10-0. That's just a personification of Penn State football since Paterno. You get so close, but yet something unfathomable happens and you don't even understand it. Now, the road record is a lot scarier than the home record. So for the home record, right, to be 3-17 against top 10 teams, but then to have 13-26 against ranked opponents in 11 seasons, right? That's kind of horrifying. Like, I'll be honest with you. That's low-key kind of horrifying. Like, and now I know Ohio State fans have been up Ryan Day's neck for not beating Michigan. But Penn State, man, like, do you want to win national championships? Do you guys see yourself as a playoff contender? I think Penn State fans have to ask this question, and I think Penn State Athletic has to ask this question. Where do you see yourself in the national landscape in 5 years? Because if USC lets go of Lincoln Riley and they get the right coach, if Washington can continue the momentum they were under with Kalen DeBoer, those programs are going to jump you because it's the West Coast. They don't have to recruit the same kind of players you do. And never mind the fact, you have to recruit in Jersey, Pennsylvania, and in Virginia. That's Penn State's nucleus, basically, of their recruiting. And if they can't recruit well in that area because schools like Maryland, schools like North Carolina are in the same level as you, oof, good luck. Good luck, Penn State. This is the Bryan Lewis, the Spin Zone. Take care.